What's up, everybody? It's your boy Tino here, and we're here today for the last fantasy football show of the year. As it's time to celebrate, it's time to give away some awards, time to talk about some championships, and then give you and get you ready because it's never too late to get ready for the next year. If you lost, you won, you came in second, whatever place you came in, it's never too early to look towards the 2024 fantasy football draft. So we're here today, guys, to talk about all of that, as today is the last fantasy football show of the year. So, guys, we're here today. I want to say thank you to everybody that has come here every week since week one. We've talked about fantasy. I've tried to help you set that perfect lineup. Hopefully, I led you to a championship. You guys let me know in the comments what record you guys come in. Do you guys come in first? Were you a champion like your boy Tino? Because you guys know we're going to be doing a celebration here today for your boy Tino. Because Tino is a three-time back-to-back fantasy football champion. I'm feeling like Tom Brady over here building dynasties. But I don't want to get too cocky because you never know. Next year we'll have a different team, and we're going to have to run it back and try to go for number 4. So, guys, we're here. Let's get to the comments, though, and then we're going to get into all the awards and everything else like that. So, we got our guy Jadis in here, the MVP of the football shows, the guru of the NFL, the man, the myth, the legend, the biggest Philadelphia Eagles fan I think I've ever met in my life. So, what's up, Jadis? Should I be really worried about the Eagles, or is this just a huge wake-up? I think it, honestly, Jadis, it might very well be the best thing to ever happen to them, and it may wake their asses up, and they may realize that they got to get themselves into high gear, because they have looked very bad lately, and it just, but I think it will be okay. Joe Flacco, eliminating the Ravens, that would be fantastic, and that would be funny as hell. Dalvin Cook got released from the Jets. Big bust of the year. Start off with bust. We won't start off with the full award, but an honorary bust of the year. Definitely Dalvin Cook. I think we all expected Dalvin Cook to go to the Jets and do a lot better. But Breece Hall, on the other hand, came back, did his thing after being hurt for a few weeks, and he proved that he will be the number 1 running back in the Jets, and he very well could be a number 1 or 2 draft pick next year in the first or second round. Stephen A. Mel lists the top 5. He has Ravens, Niners, Browns, Bills, and Lions. I do agree with that list, but the Browns and Lions, they need to prove it to me first. I don't know. I get it. They're having great years, but we've seen it happen before where teams have had phenomenal years and then they have just completely fallen apart. So let's see. I do not think he will be. No. Name at least 3 coaches that are on the hot seat. Definitely. Well, I would say, Carolina already needs a head coach. So I will definitely say Bill Belichick, the Patriots. I still think, even though Matt Eberflus and the Bears have played very well lately, I still think Eberflus should be somewhat looked into, just, because Bears went 5-2 in the last 7 games, but they started off 0-4. We've seen a lot of blown leads, and the Bears, if they trade a few of those wins, they very well are in the playoff hunt right now. So, I don't know, though. So those are 2. And then my third one, the third one is kind of hard because I feel like, there's really not too many teams right now that are unless they're rebuilding or whatever. Well, the Chargers did fire Brandon Staley, so that would have been my third pick. But if I'm going to choose anybody, it might need to be Tennessee's head coach, Zach Taylor, or the dude from Atlanta. Because Atlanta got all these great players, but they just can't do anything correct. So those are my 3 teams. That's a good question, Jadis. I will also be giving you, because Jadis likes to ask this question, so I figured I'd put it in the awards. I'm going to give you my best game of the year. I'm going to give you the worst game of the year also. New award here for the year. Can't wait till you do the schedule for Week 18 because Dolphins-Bills, it seems like, guys, if you guys have not seen, the poll is running away. Looks like we will be live here Sunday night for the Bills and Dolphins on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we will be live for that game. And then on Saturday, we will be live for the Texans and the Colts, as it will be deciding a playoff game. The Ravens and the Steelers. Yes, the Steelers have a shot, but I feel like the Texans and Colts game will be a little better because the Ravens may sit their players. I don't know. So we'll have to see. When Roman Reigns returns, what do you think? Everybody saw what happened after The Rock came out and everything. Roman went on X and put out the laughing face. So we guys might be actually getting it. Speaking of guys, it's a Fantasy Armchair Athletes. What's up, Corey? How you doing, bro? Everybody, if you have not yet, go follow our guy, Corey, a Fantasy Armchair on the road to 1K, almost to 900. Go and hit that button if you have not yet. He was on a little bit of a layover for personal reasons, but he's back. He's ready to help you for the offseason and everything else. So go follow Fantasy Armchair. Tino, Cena strikes again. 3 years in a row. Yes, I do. Tino Cena. I like it. I don't play. I'm just here to represent. I appreciate you. Your boy CJ Stroud or your boy Tino? So, guys, let's not waste any more time, though, and continue to leave your comments, your concerns, all of that good stuff. But right now, we are going to go over every single award. I have about 3 to 4 people that I have represented for each award, and then I'm going to give you my number one, and I'm going to tell you who I feel deserves each award. But I feel like all of these players deserve to be in these categories. So, before we get into all of the great awards and everything else like that, I want to remind you guys to hit that like button on this episode, subscribe, become a member of the channel, leave a super chat or two, all that good stuff. Make sure you guys become a member. We'll be having a lot of good stuff come out for members very soon. New emotes, new emojis, new everything, content exclusive, and everything else like that. So make sure you guys go and do all that good stuff. But now, on to the awards and stuff like that. So the first thing we are going to be doing, and it's not really an award, it's more or less the 3 things that I learned this year in fantasy football. Because every year, if you win a championship, if you have the worst record in the league, no matter what way you're doing it, you always learn something that hopefully you lean and you use for the following year that either helps you go back to back, 4 peats, 5 peats. If you're just trying to get out of the basement because you're the worst team in the league, there's always things to learn in fantasy football. So the first thing I learned, and I knew this, I said this to you guys when we did the draft special. Do not draft Patrick Mahomes in the first round. Listen, he had a great season. He ended up having over 400 points still, right around there. So he didn't have a phenomenal season, or he didn't have an awful season, but Patrick Mahomes worth a first round pick? No. When there's guys like Christian McCaffrey, there's guys like if Justin Jefferson played all year, I think he would still have been up there. There's guys like CeeDee Lamb that went out there and had themselves great games. There's guys that there's so many guys. Breece Hall, I think, could very well be a first or second round pick next year. As I just said, Christian McCaffrey, Kyren Williams. We could see Puka go very, very fast and very high in the drafts next year. But you don't have to draft Patrick Mahomes. And in reality, I say it every year, you don't have to draft quarterbacks very high in the drafts. For example, I did one of my drafts this year, and I picked up CJ Stroud in the 17th round. It was the second to last round, and I ended up getting him, and he ended up becoming my best quarterback when I had Joe Burrow, I had Justin Herbert, I had Jared Goff, and here comes good old rookie boy CJ Stroud, putting up big numbers and helping your boy try to get into the playoffs. It didn't work out, but CJ Stroud. So, guys, way down a quarterback. And don't draft Patrick Mahomes in the first round, first overall. Don't be that guy. Second thing I learned, don't trade just to trade. All year this year, guys, I tried. I wanted, Corey, if you're still here, you know I asked you a few times in the beginning of the season. I said, I wanted to trade Raheem Mostert. I wanted to trade him. He gets hurt. He's going to get hurt. I'm just waiting for the day he gets hurt. Well, he never got hurt. I ended up trading him away for Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen went down into the gutter, and Raheem Mostert just continued to go up. He has 20-plus touchdowns. He's had the best year of his career. He stayed healthy for the most part. He only missed last week, but if it wasn't for Raheem Mostert, many people might not be where they were this year with and most likely in the fantasy championship or pretty close to it. I'm sure if I kept him, I'm sure something would have happened to him, but it's woulda, coulda, shoulda. And just don't make trades to make trades because making trades like that is dumb. The waiver wire pickups, though, the guys, this is the biggest thing I learned. waiver wire pickups can literally win you a fantasy championship. We will talk about the best waiver wire pickups in a little bit, but I mentioned Kyren Williams a little bit ago. He wasn't even drafted in most leagues. We were going out and we thought it was going to be Cam Akers. We thought maybe we'd have a little bit of Royce Freeman, but none of that happened. Cam Akers got traded to the Vikings. He went on IR, and this guy, Kyren Williams, came up and just did his thing. So rookies and waiver wire pickups, guys, are huge because you never know. Zamir White in the late seasons, if you're able to get him. Ty Chandler. Evan Ingram, if you didn't draft him, I feel like people probably did draft him. Trey McBride for a tight end. Jake Ferguson for a tight end. Dalton Schultz, maybe a lot of people didn't draft him. I know some people did, but not many people did. So those are the three things that I learned here this year in the fantasy football season. And I won a championship in one league, and there's still things to come out and learn. So you can never learn too much. So those are my three things. Let me know what you guys learned this year in the chat, though. Rookie of the year. Let's start off with our first award, and let's go with that Rookie of the Year. As we're talking about waiver wire pickup, we're talking about rookies and stuff like that. So my three top rookies of the year, and I want you guys in the chat to let me know if you guys see somebody. This is just my three picks that I think. We got two Detroit Lions on here. Yes, we do. Detroit Lions, guys. Jahmyr Gibbs, 233 points. He had he had a little bit of committee going with David Montgomery, but they did very well together. And Jahmyr Gibbs, it took him a little bit longer to get going than we expected. But once he did, he got over 200 points and a full season with Jahmyr Gibbs now. He very well could have 300 points next year. Sam Laporta, tight end. Guys, you guys know how I always talk about that tight end position. We hate the tight end position because it's the hardest position to ever predict in the NFL football season. But Sam Laporta came in. He put up numbers. He has more points than George Kittle. He has more points than Cole Kmet. He has more points than Travis freaking Kelce that was probably drafted in the first or second round. He has more points than obviously different because he got hurt, but Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram missed a few games. Pat Fryer was somebody that we were very high on. Sam Laporta beat all of those guys. So Sam Laporta putting up big numbers as he had 225 points, not yards. But last and third finalist of this award for the year, Rookie of the Year. You guys should already know who this is. I've said his name a million times on the show already, but we're just going to say it and we're going to continue to say it. It is the guy from the Houston Texans. It's that quarterback. His name, we're going to do a little bit of an LA night type of a thing. It's C.J. Stroud. Kind of worked, but C.J. Stroud, guys, put up and had 379 fantasy points. He had a game where he had 50 fantasy points. He had a streak where he was putting up 15 plus fantasy points. He was throwing touchdowns, and he was leading people to wins left and right. So he has over 100 and plus more points than both Gibbs and Sam Laporta. So I don't think that there's any reason to wait and just go with but the Rookie of the Year, guys, obviously has to be unanimously C.J. Stroud. As I said, 379 fantasy points, multiple games with 2+ touchdowns, went on a streak where he wasn't throwing interceptions, and if he didn't get hurt, he very well could have 450 plus points right now. So C.J. Stroud is my Rookie of the Year in the NFL football and fantasy football season. Again, we'll have to see what happens, but that's who I got for the Rookie of the Year. We'll see what happens in the real NFL, though. Now let's go with disappointments. And there's a lot of big names on here. There are 4 big names that I have on here. And I do have, we mentioned him earlier, Patrick Mahomes on here. Patrick Mahomes had exactly 431 points. But that is a lot, and don't get me wrong. But what I will say is that, yes, it came. He figured it out. He got the points. But the inconsistency and the the guys that drafted Mahomes in 2 of my leagues ended up being 2 of the worst teams in the league this year. So Patrick Mahomes, yes, he had 431 points, but it was a huge disappointment. And for people that drafted him first, second round, probably didn't have a great season. George Pickens, though, guys, George Pickens last year had himself a great year. We thought he'd be the number 1. He was going to come in. He was going to do his thing. Well, that didn't happen. He had a few games where he had under 10 points. He had a few games where he literally caught one ball, caught the touchdown, and that was it. And then he would have a few games like he's had the last 2 weeks where he's put up over 20 plus fantasy points. So George Pickens has 208 points, but if you take away the last 2 weeks, he has probably like 150 points. So George Pickens, huge bust this year for me and a big disappointment. Now, the two big disappointments that I have for the year, they did still have over 200 points, but having them on my teams, I know the struggle, and it was not a fun way to get to 200 points. And the first one we're going to talk about, it's Travis Kelce, guys. He was that first tight end. He was the guy that everybody was keeping. I even saw people draft him first overall. And I don't think he should be drafted in the first or second round next year because Travis Kelce, yes, he had 219 points, but we've only seen him have a few big games. He had a few games where he had about like 15, 18 points. But then we've seen when we needed him the most, he had 4 points, he had 5 points, he had 7 points. And he just has not done very well. And maybe that's the Taylor Swift effect. I don't know what it is. But Kelce just isn't Kelce right now. And the fact that it is, it's sad. Because Travis Kelce was that tight end that we always thought we can rely on. But here we are in fantasy championship week, starting guys like Trey McBride, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, guys like that outscored Travis Kelce and just, yeah. So hard 219 points. And I still think you draft Kelce next year. Just don't be wasting and don't be drafting and spending and having a high capital draft capital on Travis Kelce. Now, this one hurts me the most because it looks like this will be the last year he's on any of my teams. And I'm sure next year he'll go out and he'll have the best year of his career. He'll be the comeback player of the year and he'll have like 400 fantasy points. But he can go do that on another team. But Derrick Henry, guys, I don't know what it was this year, but Derrick Henry did not look like the king. There was a few games he did. He had 20-plus points in 3 straight games. But then we've seen the last few weeks, in the last 3 out of 4 weeks against Houston twice, and I forgot who they faced the other game, but he just did not have a very good game. He couldn't get going. He doesn't have that burst that we know that King Henry's seen. We've seen it a few times, but I don't know if it's the offensive line. I don't know if it's Will Levis. I don't know what it is, but Derrick Henry just did not have a good year, and it was a big disappointment for people like me that kept him. Maybe you drafted him very high in the draft. I think Derrick Henry could fall to the 3rd or 4th round next year. So we'll have to see, maybe even further. But again, it depends how people draft. But those are my 4 disappointments of the year. So can somebody give me a drum roll, please? Because my disappointment, and the biggest disappointment in my eyes this year, has to be King Henry. He had 229 fantasy points. He couldn't get going the way that we expected him to. He had too many games with under 10 points. He had too many games where he didn't get in the end zone, where he is on the 1-yard line, where Will Levis stole the ball from him. And I don't know, Tyjae Spears got in the game a lot. We saw some rookie get in the game last week. I don't know what it was, but this year, my biggest disappointment is Derrick Henry. I love you, King, but just a big disappointment this year. So let's get to the next award. And it's kind of an award, but it is my game of the year. And it is the worst game of the year in my eyes. So let's talk about the best game of the year first. Because the best game in my eyes that was this year, it was week 13 of the NFL season. As we saw the Dallas Cowboys take on the Seattle Seahawks. The final score ended up being 41-35. We saw Dak. We saw back and forth. We saw things go left and right. It was a beautiful game, and I love high-scoring games. So week 13, 41-35, Cowboys and Seahawks had themselves a phenomenal showing. It was a fun game to watch. That is why it is my game of the year. Again, we had a lot of other good games. We saw overtime games kicked by a field goal. We've seen a bunch of crazier games, but in my eyes, that game was just so much fun to watch. And like I said, I love watching games when there is a bunch of scoring. So that is my game of the year. The worst game of the year, I feel like you should all know what the worst game of the year is. Before I announce what the worst game of the year is, I want to hear in the chat what do you guys think the worst game of the year is? And Eric is asking, are you streaming NXT Evil tonight? Well, Eric, if you were here last night, you would have seen. But if you were not, if you left a little later or a little earlier, that's okay. Because the answer to that question is yes, we are. We will be live here tonight at 7 o'clock to Tuesday night NXT. It's back here for one night only, guys, for a little bit more time. As we go, we watch NXT New Year's Eve. We got Trick and Dragunov. We got Fallen and Tiffany. We got Lyra. We got Blair. We got Roxanne. We got Lexis King and so much more, guys. We will be here live tonight. It's a Tuesday doubleheader here on Tino's Time. But back to the question that I asked you guys. What do you guys think the worst game of the year is? I want to know. What do you guys think? While I go and share this out to a few other places, I want to know what you guys think. We got 5 people in here. I want to hear one of you tell me an answer. Let's see what we got. We only got 3 likes, guys. You guys got to be hitting that like button also if you have not yet. Hit that like button, everybody. Let's get it. Let's do that thing, you know. So worst game. Let's see if anybody knows. Let's see. No. Give it another minute. People don't want to answer me. What the hell? Rude. Rude. All right. Well, you guys are no fun. So, the worst game of the year, guys. Week 3 of the NFL football season. It was the Miami Dolphins taking on the Denver Broncos. As we saw the Denver Broncos give up a whopping 70 points to the Dolphins. Raheem Mostert had a day. Devon Achane had a day. Tyreek Hill had himself a day. Everybody had a day on the Dolphins. And the Broncos just shit the bed really bad. So the worst game of the year, no doubt, has to be that 70-20 game, week 3 of the NFL football season. So that's what we got for games of the year. Now, let's get into a fun award that I always like because this is one of my awards that I think people kind of not think about too much. But you always got to think about the draft steals of the year. And what that means is the guy that we drafted, we weren't really too expecting too much, but this guy ended up being the baller, and he led us to championships, playoff bursts, and everything else like that. So let's talk about my 4 nominees for this award, and then we're going to give you the winner. So my first nominee is Jakobi Meyers of the Las Vegas Raiders. I said Oakland. The Las Vegas Raiders. Jakobi Meyers obviously he was on the New England Patriots last year, we saw, and he was that guy. He couldn't catch touchdowns. He had to have a bunch of yards. He was like Deontay Johnson out there. He couldn't get it going, and when he did, it was a good time. We got MA Football in the house. What's up, MA Football guy? We appreciate you stopping by. He says we got Corey. We got a little bit of the fantasy armchair taking over Tino's Time, guys. You'll love to see it. But let's talk about those draft steals of the year because these guys are guys that we drafted really late and we just weren't expecting much. But they, like I said, came out and they helped you out. So as I said, Jakobi Meyers for the Las Vegas Raiders, he had 199 points. Davante Adams is obviously still at number 1 in Las Vegas, but Jakobi proved to be that great number 2 that they were looking for. Speaking of wide receivers, though, this guy he went on to be the number 1 wide receiver in Baltimore, and his name was, you smelling some flowers, guys, because it's Zay Flowers. He had 206 points. We just talked about number 1 wide receivers. He looks like he is that number 1 wide receiver that Lamar Jackson has been looking for. He's fast. He can spread the ball up the field. He can go and do these routes that it seems like nobody else can. Zay Flowers, 206, having himself draft point, or he was a draft steal if you took it and if you rode and you hoped that he would lead you to a championship and that he would help you out this year, because I don't think many people were talking about Zay Flowers at and during the draft. My third nominee is DeAndre Swift, guys, of the Philadelphia Eagles. Obviously, going from the Detroit Lions to Philadelphia was kind of a different situation. We really didn't know who was going to be the backfield leader with DeAndre Swift's injuries and everything else like that. We didn't know if Kenneth Gainwell would be the number 1. We didn't know if somebody else would come over. We didn't know what was going to go on in that backfield. But DeAndre Swift came in. He proved to be that decent flex option RB2 that we were looking for, hoping to have. And he does even have the higher ability and higher upside being on that explosive Philadelphia Eagles offense. I think I said the Phillies a few times. My bad. But the Philadelphia Eagles and DeAndre Swift went out there, did his thing, helped the Eagles, and he definitely helped you with his 199 points from a guy that we sometimes don't get very much from. But number 4 nominee is the guy we just mentioned the game over from the Miami Dolphins, and it seemed like this was the game where everybody kind of was like, okay, this guy might very well do good. We talked about him a little bit earlier today. I drafted him personally in about the 13th or 14th round. I got him because the other league I'm in is for like you have $200 to build your team. So I think I spent like $8 on him. And he ended up being one of the best and probably the best running backs of this year, having the most touchdowns ever, 15 plus touchdowns, has about 20 plus touchdowns, I think now. It is the guy from the Miami Dolphins, that running back. I mentioned him earlier. His name is Raheem Mostert. He had 267 yards, 1,012 yards rushing. He had 18 rushing touchdowns. He had, is that total? So that might, okay, so I guess he doesn't have 20. I thought he had 20, but he has 18 touchdowns still. I think, actually, you know what? I think he does have 20. Let's see, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. He has 21 touchdowns total between the rushing and the receiving. So he does have 20 plus touchdowns. 21 touchdowns, 1,000 yards, 267 points. If you drafted Raheem Mostert and you weren't dumb like I did and didn't draft or trade him away, I'm sure that guy, I think the guy that actually traded him away ended up winning the league that I was in. So you're welcome. Maybe I should get some. Give me some of the money for trading Raheem Mostert to you. But anyway, Raheem Mostert, guys, last nominee. So Jadis, give me a drum roll, please, because we got 10 people in the house. We got Chumblebee in the house now. We got Chris in the house. What's up, guys? How we doing here? But give me a drum roll, please, because the draft steal of the year, it has to be the dude from Miami Dolphins. We just mentioned him. 20 plus points or 20 plus touchdowns, 267 points. Raheem Mostert has to be your draft steal of the year. If you drafted him, he ended up becoming your number 1 running back, and you probably already drafted him after you had your number 2 running backs. So probably felt real good, unless, as I said, you were dumb like me and traded him away. So hopefully you didn't do that. But Raheem Mostert, draft steal of the year. So before we get to the 3 big awards and before we end the show, let's get to the waiver wire pickups of the year. And let's talk about my top 5 waiver wire pickups of the year. And I'm going to tell you who my number 1 is. Number 5, it's got to be Ty Chandler. He only had 90 fantasy points, but Ty Chandler, after Alexander Mattison went out, he ended up putting up 20 plus points in 2 games in big time scenarios where you probably needed a running back if you had Madison, if you were having running back issues. Ty Chandler didn't have a phenomenal season consistently, but at the end of the year when we needed him most, he put up numbers that we needed. So I think he deserves to be on this list. Jake Ferguson, we always need a tight end, guys. And this guy, when Dalton Schultz got traded, we didn't know who was going to be that guy in Dallas. But Jake Ferguson came out of nowhere and proved to be that number 1 tight end that Dak Prescott was looking for. Ferguson had 164 fantasy points and did his thing. Trey McBride, he came on a little bit late, but when he came on, he didn't stop. As he had 169 fantasy points. He had games where we were starting him over guys like George Kittle. We were starting him over many guys that we drafted earlier on in the season or traded or anything. And Trey McBride became a really guy that we really could trust at the tight end position. I think this year, the biggest thing also I learned this year too is that we have a lot more tight ends that we can trust now compared to where in the past. So the top 2 options, they're from the same team, and it's in Los Angeles. Number 2, it's got to be Kyren Williams from the Los Angeles Rams. He had 255 points, and he missed about 4 to 5 weeks because if you remember, he went on IR during like the middle of the season, and they had Raheem Mostert and Darrell Henderson Jr. as they were running it back to 2013. So Kyren Williams having 255 points, still putting up numbers like he was that number one running back. And really, honestly, when he's in the game, nobody else is getting the ball. So Kyren Williams very well could be a very high draft pick next year. Number one is Puka Nacua. Cooper Kupp came in to be that guy that we all were wanting to draft this year. But nobody was talking about this guy, Puka Nacua. And he goes out there. He becomes that number one target for Matthew Stafford. Cooper Kupp must be like that meme where he's standing there with the girl and then the guy turns his head. It's like Cooper's the girl, and then the guy turns around at Sean McVay and he sees Puka Nacua. He had 284 points. Matthew Stafford loved that connection with him. And Puka Nacua, if you drafted him really late for no reason, or you picked him up after week one, probably had yourself a number one wide receiver the rest of the year. So, Jadis, Chumblebee, somebody in the chat, give me a drum roll. A drum roll, guys. A drum roll. Give me a drum roll for your waiver wire pickup of the year. Somebody give me a drum roll. Drum roll, please. I'll do it myself since you guys are no fun. Hey, what's up, Ron? So, Ron, appreciate you, bro. But my waiver wire pickup of the year, it has to be Kyren Williams. The running back position was hectic this year. Guys going down left and right. Quarterbacks going down left and right. Everybody going down left and right. And Kyren Williams came in and helped us win us a championship, helped us to a playoff berth. And Kyren Williams did his thing and was a baller all year for the Los Angeles Rams and your fantasy football team. And next year, if he continues to be that number one, and if he's on the depth chart as the number one running back of the year or on the Rams next year, very high draft pick. And I think Kyren Williams will be, and hopefully he will continue to do that next year. So those are, and that is my waiver wire pickup of the year. What's up, Ron? How you doing, bro? Thanks for coming and hanging out. We appreciate you here on Tino's Time. We got 9 people in the house, guys. If you have not yet, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, join the conversation. We're talking awards. Let me know what you guys are feeling, what you guys are thinking, how you guys enjoying. Did you guys win your championships? What'd you guys do? I haven't heard nobody talk about anything that they've done. And did anybody win a championship? I know Corey did. Corey said he won 2 championships. So, I mean, hey now. So, continue to leave your comments in the chat, guys. But let's get to the next award. And it is time for our last 3 awards of the episode. And then we're going to get going and get ready for New Year's Evil tonight at 7 o'clock. So, the last award is the biggest bust of the year. Who is the guy that we drafted high? Who is the guy that we drafted that we thought was going to go out there and do his thing? And it just did not happen this year. So my 4 nominees for this award is Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, we thought he was going to go in there and be that number one for Jacksonville Jaguars. And he definitely had a few games that he went out there. And I know after week 1, after he had that big game week 1, everybody was jumping on the hype train. But then after that, it kind of fizzled away. And he just really never got going consistently and never became that wide receiver that we really thought we could trust. He did have 208 points, but from what we were expecting, Calvin Ridley wasn't it. But again, what are you going to do when you miss that much football? You can't expect guys just to come back and be able to do what they did when they were on the field before. So Calvin Ridley, one of my nominees. Second nominee is the guy from the Green Bay Fudge Packers. His name is Aaron Jones. It's the running back. I remember drafting him last year in the 2nd round. He did do very well last year, but this year I saw people taking him also in the 2nd, 3rd round. And Aaron Jones ended up on the waiver wire by like week 10. He only had 115 fantasy points. He had a great week 1 against the Chicago Bears. But then after that, he tore his hamstring. He strained his hamstring. And he could just never recover from it. He's come on a little bit in the past few weeks, which is good if you hold on to him. Maybe he helped lead you to a championship. But for where we drafted Aaron Jones, he wasn't the guy that we all were expecting him to be. Number 3, it's the guy from the Los Angeles Chargers. He was the human joystick, except this year, I don't know what the heck happened to that joystick, but it was like flittering out, and it was just all over the place because that running back over there that we knew that could catch the ball left and right, do his thing, score touchdowns, and everything else like that. Austin Ekeler only had 173 points, and this guy was going second, third overall in most fantasy drafts. I actually took him over Christian McCaffrey, and now looking back at that, probably a dumb decision. But at the time, I thought maybe Austin Ekeler would do what he did every year. But that's when it comes to where I think I'm the jinx. So I think Austin Ekeler will maybe fall to like the second round next year. But he's still such a great player that a bad season for him, I know next year he'll want to be, and he'll want to be even better. And he's somebody like us that plays fantasy football that knows that we need him, and he knows that he needs him to do what he needs to do because he drafts him on his own team. So he knows that he needs to do better. So don't worry too much about Austin Ekeler. This year just wasn't his year. Diontae Johnson, though, number 1 wide receiver in Pittsburgh. He's going to be a great wide receiver, number 10 in the top 10 of receivers. We thought he was going to have over 1,000 yards. We thought he'd have 10-plus touchdowns. We thought he'd do his thing. At least I did. I thought there was no way that it could get worse than it did last year. But this year, he did catch a couple touchdowns more than he did last year. But Diontae Johnson was never that number 1 wide receiver. The Pittsburgh offense was a disaster most of the year. The only 2 people I feel like we really could have trusted most of the year on the Steelers was Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. And that's kind of crazy when George Pickens had a decent year last year. We were all drafting him. We talked about him a little bit ago and the disappointments. But his counterpart and his teammate, his other wide receiver, Diontae Johnson, only had 133 yards or 133 fantasy points. And for somebody that I know, like other people I've seen draft, he became their number 1 or 2 wide receiver, and it just wasn't it. He really bad this year. So those are my 4 busts of the year. But the award for the bust of the year has to go to the guy that we all drafted 2nd or 3rd overall from the Los Angeles Chargers. It was the human joystick. He just wasn't it this year. But Austin Ekeler, 173 points. The only reason why I feel like he's above everybody else on this list is because he was drafted 2nd or 3rd, and you most likely had him as your first pick. And most likely, if you had him, you're probably not doing very well. So, yeah, Austin Ekeler, biggest disappointment of the year. So, the second to last award, the co-main event, I should say, or the award before the main event, it is the breakout performance and the breakout player of the year. For these guys, we weren't expecting too much, but they went out there, they did their thing, and they proved that they may be very draft worthy in 2020 in 2024. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. We're going to take a drink of my water. We're going to answer a question, and then we'll get back to you. I'm gonna die of thirst, guys. Ron said he won. Hey now, Ron. Fantasy champions together. What did you think of my question? I thought your questions were good, Jadis. Thank you for. I always appreciate your questions. Andrade showing up on NXT. That'd be crazy. That would be crazy. So let's get to that second to last award, and this award is the breakout player of the year, as I just said. Guys that we weren't expecting too much from, but they went out there and did their thing. And I have 5 nominees for this award. We have, at number 5, Jordan Addison became that number 2 wide receiver that they drafted, and they hoped that he would be not just in fantasy, but in the NFL in reality too. He had 205 points. He was the number 1 wide receiver for a little bit of time when Justin Jefferson was out, and he proved that he could be that guy. So Jordan Addison could very well be a number 2 wide receiver or flex option next year. David Njoku, guys, as long as Joe Flacco is the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, if Joe Flacco is the number 1 quarterback next year for the Browns, which very well most likely, maybe likely, David Njoku, guys, could be a top 10 tight end next year. He had 202 points. He's come around very big since Joe Flacco has been at quarterback. He has had 20-plus points. He's had about 40-plus receptions, over 250-plus yards, 3+ touchdowns. And David Njoku just is that guy. And we always need that tight end position. So, David Njoku, one of the breakouts of the year. James Cook didn't have a great like 2 out of the last 3 weeks. But since Joe Brady's been around and he's been since the Bills moved on and they finally changed their coaching staff, James Cook proved to be that number one wide receiver, that number one running back that we all knew that his brother was when he was on the Vikings. James Cook looked just like Dalvin out there, but maybe even a little better. James Cook, 224 points. He probably helped you get to the championship. He definitely helped me, even though he had a giant turd on and in the championship week. It was okay because James Cook, if it wasn't for you, guy, I may not have made it to the championship. Oh, guys, also, you know how I told you earlier I traded Raheem Mostert? Well, in the same league, I dropped Dak Prescott in the same league the week after he had that shitty-ass game against the 49ers. Well, after that week and after I dropped him, he had 20-plus fantasy points the rest of the year. He ended the season with 474 fantasy points, was one of the top quarterback scoring of the year, had multiple touchdown games, throwing touchdowns to CeeDee Lamb, made it look easy. Dak Prescott had himself one hell of a season, and he proved that he is a very good player and that he is the quarterback that we can trust in fantasy football. Listen, he may very well be on the fantasy MVP list in real life, but I didn't put him on my fantasy football list just because Dak Prescott hasn't been very good in the past. But this year, he broke out, and he proved to be that quarterback that we all knew that we can trust eventually. So, Dak Prescott, 474 points. Rashee Rice, over in Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes has been looking for that tight end. He's been looking for that wide receiver that he could trust since Tyreek Hill left. And Rice came out of nowhere. He scored 212 fantasy points. He did his thing every week. He was that number 2 wide receiver flex option, wide receiver 3, depending on what type of league you were in, that you could throw out there, and he would definitely score. And at one point, he was on a 10-plus scoring week by week that he was putting up 10-plus points every week, and we were okay with it. So, Rashee Rice, I think he deserves to be on this list. He had 212 fantasy points and did his thing. But my number one in the breakout superstar of the year, it has to be Dak Prescott. 474 points. People were drafting him as their backup quarterback. I drafted him really late in one of my leagues. I thought I got a great thing. And I guess in the end of the day, I ended up doing that because I thought about it. If I did not drop Dak or Raheem or trade Raheem, I probably end up very close to a fantasy championship in that league. So that's why I said one of the biggest things I learned this year is do not trade just to trade. Trust your guys and trust what you put in and what you draft. And if they're doing good, there's no reason to change it. Don't break what's not broken. But Dak Prescott, breakout player in fantasy football, doing his thing, almost having 500 fantasy points. So now, guys, it's time for the main event of today's award show and the last award before we say goodbye to the fantasy football season until September when we come back here for year number 4 of Tino's Time Fantasy Football shows. I was thinking about it too, guys. I've been a champion 3 straight years, and we started this podcast of fantasy football back in 2020 when we started the channel. So Tino's won a championship every year that he's done this show. So you guys really do help me win championships. So give a little bit of credit to you guys. Give a pat on your back. I appreciate you guys always coming in here. So now, before we get back to the chat and before, as I said, we say goodbye and we get ready for the rest of the week, let's talk about the last award, and that award is the Fantasy Football MVP. I feel like also, before I forget, I didn't put it in as an award, but I will say this. I feel like the biggest and the best comeback player of the year is, and it's going to probably be Christian McCaffrey or somebody like a Joe Flacco, where we saw him come out of nowhere. And yes, it's been only a short period of time, but Joe Flacco has literally brought the Browns back from the dead and has literally led them to a championship, to the playoffs, and possibly going to be playing in and to see how far they can go in the playoffs. So just an honorary mention of a comeback player of the year, because Christian McCaffrey obviously has been hurt. He's had a lot of good years, but this is the first year besides this week. He'll be out this week, of course. But hey, he got through the fantasy football season. So get ready for the divisional round. But Christian McCaffrey, comeback player of the year. But MVPs, fantasy MVPs. I didn't put Dak in this position, but I did put Christian McCaffrey in the awards for the fantasy football MVP because, as I said, he was the comeback player of the year in my eyes. I know in the real NFL, there's a lot of controversy where it could be DeMar Hamlin because of what happened, Joe Flacco. There's a lot of other players that are nominated, but I know there's a lot of slack. But I'm talking about comeback players in fantasy because Christian McCaffrey has always been that guy we drafted, but I feel like he spent more time on our IR spot than he's actually spent in the running back position than he has in the last few years when he was with Carolina and when he was on the 49ers. So it was nice to see Christian McCaffrey is breaking records, doing his thing, and everything else like that. So, wait. We got breaking news from Tom. MJF, is this true? MJF signs. Listen, I trust Tom. No, he's not. No, he is not. Tom is not a troll. So we're going to take a quick, before we get to that, let's take a look and see. I don't know. He is not a troll. I trust Tom. He's got a lot of good, Tom's got a lot of good, I got a lot of good sources. So somebody, let's go look this up. That'd be crazy. I don't know. Was legitimately hurt. He's still deal. I don't know. We'll have to see. But Tom, you better not be lying to us. Don't tease us with that. So back to the fantasy football awards. We got the other MVP nominee is TJ Hockenson. TJ Hockenson, probably the most consistent tight end in the NFL this year. Obviously, we talked about Travis Kelce a little bit earlier. He didn't have a very good season, but TJ Hockenson had 219 points. Obviously, only a few more than Travis Kelce, but TJ Hockenson, if it was Nick Mullins, if it was Joshua Dobbs, if it was Kirk Cousins, whoever it was would throw him the ball. So TJ Hockenson, I think, deserves a nominee as fantasy MVP. We got CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb has obviously had himself a ridiculous amount of points the last few weeks. But before that, CeeDee Lamb has proven that he has been that number one wide receiver. He's done his thing on the Dallas Cowboys. He had 367 fantasy points this year, as Dak Prescott had 474. It's like a connection like no other. Dak and Lamb, it's insane. So Dak, he's the breakout player nominee and the breakout player of the year. But I think CeeDee Lamb deserves an MVP nomination. The other two nominees we got, it's the guy over in San Francisco. It's not C-Mac, as I just mentioned. It's his quarterback, Brock freaking Purdy, everybody. It's a Brock Purdy here in fantasy football land because Brock Purdy had 454 points, did his thing left and right, multiple games with 20-plus points, had a few 40-point games, left and right. It didn't matter who was catching the ball for him, if it was Brandon Ayuk, if it was Deebo Samuel, if it was C-Mac, if it was guys that we didn't know who their names were. He always did it, and he always found me. Let me know how many more yards he needs to get, and to do that, obviously, he missed a few weeks. He missed the semifinals of the fantasy football playoffs. He missed a few weeks here and there, but Tyreek Hill has been one of the most consistent wide receivers. When he's out there, it don't matter who and where he throws the ball to. He'll find a way to catch it, and he may take it to the house every time he gets a reception. So Tyreek Hill deserves to be on this list. So running back, our nominees are Tyreek Hill, Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, TJ Hockenson, and Brock Purdy. So our fantasy football MVP is the guy over in and on the Miami Dolphins. It is our guy Cheetah. It is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill has been one of the best wide receivers with guys like Stephon Diggs not having a good year, with guys like Justin Jefferson being out. Tyreek Hill, he missed a few games here and there, but he always went out there. And when he was out there, he always did his thing. And he was always that lineup lock guy that we knew that we could trust every single week. So in my eyes, Tyreek Hill is this year's fantasy football MVP. And obviously, we all have different opinions on all of these awards. So if you guys have anything that you guys want to say about my picks, my award nominees, my picks for those awards, let me know because I want to see what you guys think about them. But that was, and that is all of the fantasy football awards that I got here for you today on the channel. So let's go through the chat one last time, and then we're going to say goodbye. So let's get and let's talk about it. Let me find. Yes, sir. I heard Andrade. Okay. Okay, here we are. I heard Andrade could show up tonight. That would be fun. Hardest working man, broadcaster I follow. Thank you. I appreciate that. Back it up. God, listen, you always got to put in that work, man. You never stop grinding. That's what I always say. I can't wait. Okay, I read that one. And you know David was hanging out with the Miz. Who? Damn, you really are a curse. Sitting Dak. Yeah, sitting Dak, dropping Dak, and then he balls. The only way Eagles win the division, yes, Cowboys lose and Eagles win. Because if you're release guys, they ball out like, I don't know, man. I bench them, I drop them. It don't matter what I do. I just, yeah. Barely, hey, as it don't matter where it Jadis. It never matters how you get in, bro. You just got to get in. And I said to the people in my league, I told them, do not let me into the playoffs. The same exact thing happened last year. I was 4-8 last year. I won 2 weeks in a row. I needed everything to happen that needed to happen. And I won the championship last year. This year, I was 5-7. I needed to win 2 weeks. I needed a bunch of things to happen. They happened. And then your boy Tino won the championship. I as Xavier Woods likes to say, he balls at pay-per-views on my GM mode. When your boy Tino gets into the playoffs, in most of his leagues besides a few, he usually balls out. So don't let me into the playoffs. Lamar going to be the MVP. Yes, Lamar Jackson, most likely the MVP of football, but I'm just talking about fantasy football. And I think Lamar Jackson probably could have been in the same nominations for fantasy football MVP, but he had a few really good games, but then you'd have a few games that were like, Lamar, what is going on? As much as we all love Lamar and what has come from, but either way, I don't know. I mean, exactly. So it looks like Tom, please don't mess with us with that. I mean, it does make sense. I mean, it would, wouldn't it? But we'll have to see what happens. What's up, Daniel? Thanks for stopping by. Oh, always. Oh, yeah, that's right. AEW did remove MJF. That's right. Wouldn't it be crazy if MJF showed up on SmackDown? Who do beat Io Sky for the Women's World Champion? I say it's your girl, Bayley. David OG was hanging out with The Miz. Oh, okay. I'm like, who are you talking about? Like, I have no idea. So, guys, that is all the awards that I got here for you. And I think that's a great way to wrap up the 2024 or the 2023 fantasy football season, I should say, because we are now in the year 2024. And as I said earlier in the beginning of the show, it's never too early to think about next year to get ready so you can win your championship and you can be like me and you can be like the other champions this year and you can celebrate a fantasy football league championship like us next year. If you are a champion like me and others, hopefully you have yourself a good one. Hopefully you got yourself a trophy, you got a belt, whatever you give away. Hopefully you weren't like that last place winner, as you can see the last place award right there. You don't want to be the last place award because you have bad things happen and everything else like that. I know the guy in my league went 3-11, and I haven't come up with any like bad things to do to people because I think you don't want to do that. But it would be kind of funny to have some type of like trophy or something another for the last place team that is the worst team in the league for that year. Yes, you get the first round pick for the following season, but there's a consequence for sucking at fantasy football. So I don't know, but guys, that's how we rack it up. That's how we wrap up the 2023 fantasy football season. And as I said, guys, this will be the last fantasy football season show of the year. or until next year, until we start getting ready for drafts next year, I'm going to try to do stuff if there are things that come out like throughout the off season. Maybe I'll try to get on Corey's channel. Maybe me and Corey will come here. I want to try to get on other fantasy football shows. So we will still talk about fantasy football here and there, but we will not be back consistently covering fantasy football weekly until next year, the 2024, the 2025 season, as we get ready to defend those titles. Or if you had a bad year, we try to help you win a championship and get back on track and have yourselves a good one. So, guys, that's all I got here for you today for the episode of the Fantasy Football Awards. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. As I said earlier, remember to go and get yourself and become a member of the channel. Leave a super chat or two. Go and get yourself some merchandise on bonfire.com. Go and make sure that you guys go follow all the social medias here on the channel. Go and do all that good stuff. Go follow the Southside Boys, guys. We will be back with the Southside Boys in just a few months, just in March. We'll be coming back with the Southside Boys weekly. I don't know if we're going to keep it on Thursdays, most likely, but I'll have to talk to Deech and Justin, see what they want to do. So we will be covering, we'll still be talking some other sports besides wrestling. But until March and until next year for fantasy football, guys, that is all that I have here for you. So before we go here, let me tell you who today's MVP is of the episode. As today's MVP, he got his title back, and he's going to try to keep it tonight again, as we'll be live again tonight for NXT New Year's Evil. But today's MVP, he's keeping his champion as being the greatest of the all times in the fantasy football shows. It is our guy, Mr. Jadis Young. Jadis Young is today's fantasy football MVP. Jadis always coming in here, asking good questions, staying all episode long, and just being here to always be here and hang out with Tino. So, Jadis, I appreciate you, man. You're the best, and I just do. So, guys, as I said, that's all we got here for fantasy football. We ringing it in, we putting it away until next year. So, time to move on to what's tonight. Tonight, we'll be back here, as I said earlier. We'll be back here tonight. I haven't heard from Leo or Lamar, so I doubt they'll be joining, but we'll have to see what goes down. But I'll be here tonight, guys, as it's Trick Williams, it's Dragunov, it's Fallen, it's Tiffany, it's Ariana Grace, it's Lyra, it's Lexus, it's Roxanne Perez, it's the stars of NXT, as it's time to ring in the new year with some NXT New Year's Evil, as it is also our 3-year anniversary of covering wrestling here on the channel with Survivor Series and then New Year's Evil. First few things we covered here on the channel. So, little special show for me tonight, because the first NXT show we ever did, actually, guys, was New Year's Evil. The New Year's Evil that Rhea Ripley and Raquel Rodriguez, I should say, not Roxanne. Raquel and Rhea had themselves a false count anywhere. Rhea threw Raquel, or Raquel threw Rhea through the door, and it was just a great show. So tonight, let's celebrate our 3-year anniversary of watching NXT with some NXT New Year's Evil on the channel at 7 o'clock. So, guys, as I said, thank you so much for coming here weekly every Tuesday for the Fantasy Football Show. Hopefully, I helped you win the championship, and if not, I'm sorry, but hopefully you'll come back next year and you'll support me and help me win number 4, and hopefully you'll win 1. Or you could just go check out all the other great fantasy football content creators if you don't like me. So, I feel like if you don't like me, I feel like you haven't been here this long. So, I appreciate you guys. So, as I said, guys, time to put the fantasy football away until next year. Later this year. So, we'll be coming out, and I'll be letting you know we'll have a new schedule come out next Monday for the rest of January, and then we'll let you know the full schedule for the spring in February when we start and we get the new schedule out and we get ready for the road to WrestleMania. We will still be live here on Tuesdays. It's just going to be something a little bit different. So, guys, we won't be gone on Tuesdays. We'll still be here. So don't worry about that. But I'm done rambling. I'm done talking. And after winning the championship and after having this long, crazy season of fantasy football, kind of happy to have it put away. So, guys, that's all I got here for you today. As I said, remember to go and follow all the social medias here on Tino's Time. Make sure to go and follow the Southside Boys. Make sure to hit that like button if you have not yet on this episode. Make sure to go and subscribe on the road to 1,502K. And make sure also, guys, turn that notification button on so you know when we go live next, which will be tonight for NXT New Year's Evil. So, guys, have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon, and I'll see you here tonight for NXT New Year's Evil. But before we go, guys, I got to stand up, and we got to celebrate because your boy Tino is a fantasy football champion. And until next year, I don't care what anybody says. I don't care if anybody didn't set their lineup. That's not my issue. I won. I am a champion. And until next year, no one can take it away. So, guys, have a great rest of your Tuesday afternoon, and I'll see you here tonight for NXT New Year's Evil.